This really happened. I saw it with my own eyes. Maybe it didn't happen as I see it, but more on that later. So me and 3 friends from university were planning to go out camping. One of us, Darren, said his family had a cabin in northeast Wyoming. His grandparents used to live there, now they're dead and there's no one stopping us from going there. Of course, me, Michael, and Celeste disliked the idea of staying in a cabin. It's a fucking camping trip, we have to go sleep in the wilderness. So Darren told us about the woods near the cabin. I don't remember much about the trip, but I remember we made a couple of racist jokes after seeing a sign about the Black Hills. Michael, who is black, was not happy. The car pulled up outside the cabin. That's practically a mansion, not a cabin, Celeste said. It was 2 floors tall and pretty big, about the width and length of 3 buses put end to end or maybe less. I'm not good with measurements. Darren went inside to check if the place was still clean. We waited impatiently until he came out and then we lugged our shit down through the forest. Darren had brought along a shotgun, so we weren't too scared of bears or whatever shit, or didn't want to appear scared in front of the others. After we set up the tents we started gathering firewood. That's when I first heard it, some mechanical grinding sound accompanied by a soft murmur. I thought it was a car at first, and I looked around for its source. But the sound died down and I continued picking up wood. I was already feeling lethargic. I returned to the campsite and started the fire. We ate canned food, roasted marshmallows, pretty typical shit. I thought I heard bushes rustling, but it was only a rabbit. Mist rolled in soon, and we were all tired as fuck and wanted to sleep. Darren was annoyed. The hell? There was never any mist when I was growing up. We told him to shut up and we stuffed our shit into the tents while the mist thickened. I got inside one tent, followed by Michael. Celeste and Darren went in the other. I couldn't sleep, though, because of a slow drone which I first attributed to insects. After about half an hour it became obvious that the sound was the same I'd heard earlier. I also heard thumping noises, one loud one followed by a soft slithery noise, and then a slightly softer one. It wasn't rocket science to figure out that someone was walking around outside. I at first thought it was Darren, and opened the tent flaps to tell him to stop it. The mist got in the tent almost immediately. I could make out a dark shape crouching at the other tent. I shuffled towards it. Turns out Darren had heard the noise too. We stared at each other nervously while the footsteps continued. We agreed that there was nothing we could do now and I went back inside my tent, nervously fingering the knife Darren had provided me with before we arrived. Maybe it was some native tribesman, or a crazed psychopath, or a fucked up animal. The footsteps stopped after a while, and I was pretty relieved. Silence for a few minutes. Then the sound murmuring and mechanical grinding started up over again. It was loud enough that I could make out what the murmuring was. It seemed to be children chanting, coming from right outside our tent. I snatched up the knife and tried to open the tent flap, but it got stuck. I wasted some time untangling my hand, and then I heard a low, raspy laugh and an unintelligible mutter. I opened the tent flaps. There was nothing there. I looked around and noticed that someone had scratched a picture into the ground, a childish-looking picture of a face. It was becoming too spooky for me to handle at that point. I woke Michael up and told him about the situation. We agreed we had to leave. I started shoveling the essentials into a bag while Michael woke up Darren and Celeste. We all had torch lights, but they were faulty or something. Switching them on in the mist resulted in only a faint glow. Darren cursed and started to lead the way, stumbling around. "What if you get lost?" Michael asked. "I won't. I've been on this trail thousands of times." After about 10 minutes of walking it became painfully obvious Darren didn't have a fucking clue where he was going. He was swearing and looking all around. Eventually he led us down a narrow path until we bumped into something. I saw several stone blocks, arranged in precise patterns. Each of the blocks had carvings on them and in the middle was a particularly large block with a large symbol, an inverted triangle combined with another triangle within a circle. It wasn't a pentagram, but it looked somewhat similar. Fuck it. This wasn't here. Let's turn back, Darren snapped, and we obeyed. Why is there a fucking huge ant mount in the middle of the forest? Celeste asked. Michael said she was blind if she thought that was an ant mount, he'd seen an archway or something. I pitched in. Darren said he'd seen metal spikes rising from the ground. We started arguing, convinced the mist was playing tricks on us. Darren wanted to return and prove what he'd seen. Eventually Celeste told us to shut up and keep going. We head in a straight line. Darren claimed to be navigating by landmarks. I hoped he was right. I kept looking behind me. I was having that feeling where you think someone's watching you or stalking you. I nearly tripped over Celeste when she fell. She shook her head and got to her feet. The ground was muddy as fuck, and it was getting even mistier. If not for the torchlight I wouldn't have any idea who she was. I grabbed her hand, more to ensure we didn't get lost than as a gesture of affection, and pulled her along as Darren got more and more distant. I recognized that tree. Darren shouted. We're getting to the cabin. I again had the feeling that something was watching me. My gut was screaming at me that something, somewhere, was wrong. I realized that the droning sound was back, softer, but still present. I started looking around, panicking. Did a head count, or more accurately, silhouette count? Me. Celeste, still holding my hand. Darren, in the lead. Michael, to the left. Who the fuck was the guy besides Michael? My grip on Celeste's hand tightened and I quickened my pace. I thought about shouting out, but I was worried that if I did the thing would turn and jump Michael or something. I didn't know what to do. I ran my fingers along the handle of my knife. Then the cabin appeared, out of nowhere. The mist was starting to disintegrate around us, and it was now possible to make out who everyone was. Darren, with his shotgun. Michael, who was the only black guy around. I looked at the thing next to Michael. She looked just like Celeste. Do I look like I made it up? The thing whose hand I was holding leaned in front of me. It wasn't Celeste. It was like a mannequin version of her that had been deformed. Hair was straggly and long, shadowing her face. Eyes were bloodshot and glowing. Mouth was, fuck, mouth gives me nightmares even now. Fucking wide and much bigger than it should be, bared in a fucked up grin. It looked almost as though someone had turned it on its side. There were fucking holes all over its fucking face, and I swear I saw worms wriggling around in there or something. I should have run or screamed, but my body was clenching up for no reason. The thing turned and walked into the mist. I caught up with the others as they entered the house, practically in fucking tears. They couldn't find the car and were arguing about where he put it. I ranted about what I'd seen in the forest and they didn't believe me until they heard the droning noise again. Darren kicked the door shut and locked it. We backed away as we heard a thumping noise against the walls. Michael was whimpering. Everything went quiet for a while, then I heard the most horrifying sound I'd ever heard. It was like a group of children had started humming, then halfway through decided to start screaming. We fled the room. I wasn't thinking straight and separated from the others. I ended up in the kitchen. There was a window there, closed. I saw Michael walking outside and was about to call for him when he turned and I saw his jaw hanging all the way to chest level. He started walking towards the window and I pulled the blinds down. For a brief second there was panic. I bumped into someone and was fucking scared it was the shapeshifter, but then Michael swore and punched me. I've never been so glad to be punched. We groped around for the light switch. It was still on. There was a dripping sound and my hair felt sticky as water dripped on it. The ceiling's leaky, I complained. Darren stumbled over and held out his hand to feel the dripping. It stopped. Celeste hit the light switch off and on. The lights came back on. The lights in the room directly adjacent, the kitchen, went off. We could hear the dripping again, but from the kitchen. I wondered if the light bulbs were melting or something. Darren told us to follow him upstairs. The kitchen lights went back on and the ones in the stairway leading to what I assumed was the basement went off. Things were so screwed by then that no one questioned what was going on. We went up the stairs. That was when the shit started piling up. An inexplicable sense of nausea and horror suddenly hit me. I suddenly felt revolted by the walls and repulsed by my friends. I lingered at the back. Celeste dropped to the floor and threw up, before collapsing there. Michael turned as if to help her, then his knees buckled and I watched as he collided with the wall, then slowly dragged himself away. I could hear Darren's footsteps. I hit the floor and gagged, but nothing came out. I kept gagging. The drone was getting louder, with the mechanical grinding now a roar. I felt dizzy, lightheaded, disoriented. I crawled on my hands and knees past Celeste. I remember my fingers brushing hers and wanting to help her, but too scared of something I couldn't see. The corridors started swimming in weird colors. It was like I was tripping out while on a high fever. I felt fucking cold, but at the same time my body felt as if it was burning. I remembered a Wikipedia article I'd once read about paradoxical undressing. I wondered if that would be my fate. I managed to make it to one bedroom. The sound died down to a drone once more. I pulled myself to the bed and collapsed on it. I couldn't sleep and wouldn't have if I could. I just wanted to rest. I waited for the world to stop spinning, then I pulled myself upright. I looked out of the window. Darren was looking right back at me. He was crouched in a tree, with his head tilted to one side and his tongue lolling out. His tongue was unnaturally long. I stared back, not being able to register what was going on. The next moment, he was right fucking at the window. He didn't jump or anything. He was in the tree one moment, at the window the next. I noticed that his eyes were small beads, sunken into his head. His tongue had holes, and in the holes were worms. He pressed his face against the glass. I pulled the blinds down as the children humming and screaming noise begun. I pulled out the knife and briefly entertained the thought of attacking the creature when the noise stopped. I cautiously pulled up the blinds. The glass had turned black, inky black. An imprint of Darren's face was present, mouth twisted grotesquely, eyes gigantic glowing white pits. I prodded it with the knife. It was an unmoving 2D picture. I pulled the blinds down. Celeste came through the door. She looked pale and disheveled. I spun to face her as she threw up on the floor again. I dragged her to the bed and laid her down. She was gasping for air, as if something was suffocating her. I remember thinking some pervert stuff that I shouldn't have been thinking at the time, then reminding myself there was something on the loose. Eventually her breathing became more regular. I asked her where the others were. She shrugged. I heard her voice at the door, "Let me in. Let me in. God. Let me in there." I immediately pulled my knife out and placed it at Celeste's throat. Her eyes grew wide with shock and alarm, but they could have been faked. "What are you doing?" "No. I'm the real one. The one out there, that's the imposter," she insisted. I was kind of in a trance, unsure of what to do and staring down at her. I noticed her hands were moving behind her back. She had a knife there too. I would have stabbed her in self-defense if the voice in the door hadn't changed to become some low, deep, guttural voice. Then it became high-pitched, like a little girl's. I pulled my knife away. Celeste immediately wriggled out from under me and put hers at my throat. Hers was curved and wickedly sharp. It reminded me of a kukri. I just stared at it stupidly, too surprised to respond, when she pulled it away and got off the bed. I snapped myself out of the trance. Now the nausea was returning. I got to the door and opened it. There was nothing there but a trail of black liquid. I thought about the dripping downstairs and realized that dull alarm rather than sharp horror it had been causing the light outages, walking above us on the ceiling, with its fluids dripping on us. I ran my hands through my hair, touching all the sticky parts from the liquid, and looked up. The thing was on the ceiling, as expected. It was close to a corner, about to turn. It seemed like an albino white male with fucking long limbs, especially the knees, which bent backwards like a bird's. He had fingers instead of toes and all 20 of them were elongated. He was facing away from me, but its head suddenly swiveled 180 degrees and stared at me. I started choking up, as if suffocated. It was hard to breathe. The thing opened its mouth, slowly and deliberately. I thought it was about to devour me when its tongue snaked out. And that's probably the most fucking terrifying thing up till then. On the tip of the tongue was my face. Like a fucking tumor. Eyes closed, lips upturned in some sort of psycho smile. There's a legend somewhere that when you see your doppelganger you die. I thought of that legend. But then the creature rounded the corner and it was gone. I lost it and followed, vision hazy. My heartbeat suddenly seemed ear-splitting to me. I was stumbling, because my legs somehow seemed unable to coordinate. I suddenly realized that I had come to the top of the staircase without realizing it. I pitched forward and toppled down. Once I lay down at the bottom, my body just seemed to shut down. I couldn't move, couldn't even turn my head. There was something dripping on my back. My eyelids seemed heavy and started closing of their own accords. I saw a white feet with fucking long fingers for toes step into view. When my eyes opened, Celeste was shaking me. She was on the brink of tears and her voice was cracking. Get up. Get up. The fucker was in your skin. The fucker was in your skin. I was naked, somehow, and my head hurt. I was about to ask her what had happened when she started pulling me backwards, towards the door. We toppled out and stumbled towards Darren's car, which was still parked there but in a different location now. I was glad to be alive. The mist had stopped completely. Celeste was downright crying now. She pushed me into the back seat. Michael was there, huddled up and face buried in his knees. Some clothes stained with blood aired besides him. They were mine. I put them on. It was tight changing in a car, but I made it work. Darren immediately stepped on the pedal, but nothing happened. He swore and did it again. I noticed that Celeste was armed with a shotgun. I asked them what was going on. The thing joined us. He looked like you. We got the fuck out of the house and found the car. We were halfway down the road. Then Michael started screaming. I looked at Michael, he had a glazed over look in his eyes. The thing burst out of your clothes and jumped out of the car. Michael had the shotgun. He was firing out of the window. We saw the thing run all the way back to the house. At the motherfucking speed of light. Goddamn. It was in my skin? Yeah. I looked down at myself. I wondered if I had been possessed or if worse, the thing had cut off my skin and worn it like a coat. I shuddered at the thought or anything crawling around in my skin. I turned to Michael and asked if he was alright. The thing talked to me. I asked him about what, he didn't respond, just kept huddled up there. I realized he was sobbing. The car jolted into motion. Darren fist pumped as the car started accelerating. I turned back towards the cabin and saw the albino thing standing on the roof of the house, watching us. I shuddered and turned back. Celeste screamed. The thing was in front of the car, crouched on the windshield. It opened its mouth and my tongue face slithered out. Celeste fired the shotgun. The glass shattered and it was thrown backwards. Darren shrieked and I saw blood coming from his face. Something pierced my face and I realized it was glass. The car skidded to a stop. The car doors opened, without any discernible reason, and I fell out. I don't know how long I lay there, body disobeying my commands to move. Darren said at least 5 minutes. Celeste disagreed, saying she came in less than a minute. It felt like hours. The thing lay directly across from me, eyes closed, as if it was sleeping. I wished I could close my eyes. Its mouth hung open and I saw myself again emerging. I didn't move or say anything, because I couldn't. My face looked at me and started to talk. I love you. I love you. I love you. It said it over and over again, occasionally mixing in I want to be you. It was coming close to me. I wondered if it was going to bite me to death. The thing's eyes shot open and I realized that it was going to kiss me. I managed to regain some control and instinctively twisted back from it. I guess that was what saved me. There was a sound like an explosion and blood spouted from the thing. Celeste was standing over it. Her face and body were bleeding and she had this spaced out, psychopathic look in her eyes. She had just fired the shotgun. My face looked directly at me. "I am you," it whispered. She fired again and I saw my own face begin rotting to nothing more than a skeleton in front of me. The thing's head flowered open. That's the best word I can find to describe it. Its head kind of split and split again, peeling away. I saw faces, lots of them, all on the inside of its head. I think I saw Celeste and Michael's faces. They were singing. They were the source of the children's hums, singing and screaming. In the center here, the brain should be, here was a single, red, cat-like eye that was rotating in its socket, and producing the mechanical grinding sound. Celeste fired one last time. The thing sort of withered away, becoming wrinkled and smaller and rotten, until it just disappeared. Celeste dropped the shotgun. I started twitching and spasming as control of my body returned to me. Eventually I stood up. We got into the car silently. Darren was bleeding too, but no one said anything. We drove back to the city in silence. We explained away the damaged car as being attacked by some crazy thieves. We had our shit patched up. Michael was still in a PTSD-like state. I hear he was like that for a while. When I asked him what he thought of the incident later, he denied it ever happened, with compelling conviction. I don't know if he forced himself not to remember or if he genuinely knows nothing of it. Darren insists I got the location wrong and that it was actually near to Yellowstone, while Celeste says we're both wrong and it was near the south. I know what I saw, but I can't remember the exact place. That happened 2 months ago. We still refrained from talking about it. If you were expecting some huge twist or something, you'd be disappointed. I still don't know what we met out there. I don't want to know, actually. I still have nightmares about my own face rotting away shouting "I am you." I know for sure I'm not fucking going camping ever again.